In the 19th century, the city of Akka in modern-day Israel was a prison city. It was essentially a penal colony in what was at that time part of the old Ottoman Empire. And this was the place to which Abdu'l-Baha, along with his parents and his siblings and his extended family, was sentenced to imprisonment and exile for life. And when the family arrived in Akka, Abdu'l-Baha was 24 years of age, and he ended up spending the following 40 years of his life as a prisoner there. But over those 40 years, he became this extraordinarily unifying presence in the lives of the people of Akka, and this was partly due to his great skill as a conversationalist. And so today I just want to look at a kind of an overview of how Abdu'l-Baha used this skill as a force for unity among the people of Akka. So even though it was a penal colony, Akka functioned as a small walled city. It had its own governor, it had a marketplace and small businesses and shops and things. But it was a really wretched place to live. It was rife with malaria and dysentery and terrible poverty. It was disastrously inadequate in terms of its basic facilities as a city. It literally had no fresh running water. The people used to say that if a bird flies over Akka, it drops dead out of the sky because it was such a filthy, disease-ridden place. And at the time, it was inhabited by a mixture of Muslims and Christians. And not surprisingly, considering the really difficult, unpleasant conditions of life in Akka, tensions would sometimes arise between these two communities of people living together. And not infrequently, little arguments would prickle up between the Muslims and Christians of Akka, often revolving around whose religion was superior. And sometimes, if tensions were running high and times were particularly hard, these debates would sometimes even escalate into episodes of physical violence in the streets and in the marketplace. And so, whenever Abdu'l-Baha was passing through the marketplace and he overheard one of these debacles getting out of hand, he would very diplomatically join the conversation, and he would listen to both sides of the argument in such a way that both parties felt like their viewpoints were being heard and acknowledged and considered. But he would then contribute something to the conversation that in some ways would invite both parties to look at the conversation from a fresh perspective, to step out of the box for a moment. He had a way of lifting the conversation up to a place where they could all get a bird's eye view, and they could look at the conversation and say, well, what's really going on here? And in order to diffuse the tension between these two people, Abdu'l-Baha would sometimes offer a little bit of humor. In one of these situations, actually, where there was this argument going on, in order to stress the need for people of different religions to be able to be friends and to get along, Abdu'l-Baha told them a joke about a Muslim, a Christian, and a Jew who are stuck on a life raft and they're lost at sea in a terrible storm and they're not getting along. And the Muslim prays to God, "Oh God, please drown this Christian." And the Christian prays to God, "Oh God, please drown this Muslim." And they look at the Jew, who doesn't seem to be praying at all, and they say, "Why aren't you praying?" And the Jew says, "Oh, I'm praying for God to answer both your prayers." And so Abdu'l-Baha would use humor to diffuse this tension and shift the perspective of these two people in such a way that they would find themselves with a friendship blossoming between them. And Abdu'l-Baha was so skilled in doing this that often these two people would part ways with not only a newfound respect and appreciation for the other person's religion, but also a newly deepened love for their own religion. And the effect of Abdu'l-Baha's participation in the conversations of life in Akka began to ripple out through the city. And over time, more and more people began to see Abdu'l-Baha, this prisoner who had been dumped in their city as a criminal and an infidel. They began to see him as a consultant of sorts, someone to whom they could go for advice and insights about various problems they were dealing with, family quarrels, disputes in their businesses. And in fact, even the governor of Akka eventually decided that he wanted to send his own son to receive an education from Abdu'l-Baha. And this pattern of turning to Abdu'l-Baha for guidance became so established, it became such an established part of life in Akka that over those 40 years, the entire population of the city universally came to refer to Abdu'l-Baha simply as the Master of Akka. So that's a kind of an overview of how Abdu'l-Baha had this unifying effect in the lives of the people around him.